And I want to tell a little story that makes me smile when the corporate media is caught red-handed in what they do, which is push anything that furthers the bottom line of their corporate owners. That's what the corporate media does. They do not tell the news. If you're looking for truth tellers, don't turn to the corporate media. So everybody knows that our current healthcare system is unaffordable, unsustainable. If you look at projections right now, at some point in the near future, we'll be paying $1 out of every $3 into just going to healthcare, right? So that is unaffordable. That's unsustainable. The only way that we can have a system that actually works and makes sense is a guaranteed healthcare system, an improved Medicare for all. We can join all the other countries that have similar economic setups as ours and have guaranteed healthcare. Even this attack piece written by Chuck Blayhouse from the Mercatus Center, which is a Koch-funded Wall Street front group. The whole point of this is to obfuscate, to muddy the waters, to lie about the fact that improved Medicare for all is the only thing that is affordable, the only thing that can fix our unaffordable, broken healthcare system. And in their report, they found that improved, expanded Medicare for all would save money. They didn't mean to find that. They tried their hardest not to find that. They wanted to have this big, scary price tag, but in fact, the news about the report was all about how it found that it saved money. And that was primarily due to one person who's joining us right now on the phone, Matt Bruenig, the founder of People's Policies Project. And Matt, can you tell us how this kind of went down?
Yeah, so the report came out on July 30, and I saw the headlines in the Associated Press and some other outlets saying Medicare for all to cost $32 trillion. And I read them and I realized, oh, they're just saying that, yes, of course, spending by the federal government is going to go up because under Medicare for all, the federal government takes on almost all the healthcare spending in the economy. But I wanted to know, well, what about spending overall? We know government spending is going to go up, but other spending on premiums, deductibles, co-pays, all that's going to go down. So what is the net effect of switching into Medicare for all? So I click on the Mercatus study and I start looking at it. And then I find in row 9 of table 2 of the report, you can actually do the math and figure out what is the net savings from switching to Medicare for all. And if you do the math, you find that it saves $2 trillion over the first 10 years. Now, what's notable is the report never says this in the text. It doesn't say it in its abstract. It doesn't say it in the rest of the writing. But if you go into the table and you know what you're looking for, you can find it. And so I found that figure. I started pushing out writing based on that savings figure, and the whole media narrative flipped over the course of a few hours, and pieces started saying, wow, there's actually savings. We can insure 30 million more people. We can basically eliminate out-of-pocket expenses. We can give everyone vision, hearing, and dental, and save money while doing it. And the Koch brothers study is saying this, you know, an institution that, as you said, has every incentive not to say this. That's a really big deal. And that's why I started pushing out. Mercatus got really upset, and they started kind of doing their counteroffensive and saying that it's not true. So let's push on one thing that you mentioned, and then because I want to get to the pushback when the empire strikes back on it, because that also is amazing to look at how this whole thing works. But as you said, to me, the unaffordable affordable is actually sort of a meaningless argument, right? Because it's not a matter of cost, it's a matter of values. We're the richest country in the world at the richest point in our history, and somehow we pretend that we can't afford to have health care, right? Like that 30 million people cannot have access to health care, can die because they can't afford their insulin, a drug that's over 100 years old.
That's the issue, right? Like, we need to get everybody covered. We need people to have vision and dental and hearing. We need an actual robust healthcare system, not a sick care system that looks at people and disease as a way for people to maximize shareholder value so that, you know, a cabal of people can ride around in their golden yachts. That's the point. We need to do this based on values. And so what I'm saying is, if it raised the costs, I think that it would be worth it, right? Because people would be living and they wouldn't be worried all the time. And if they did get sick, the first thing in their mind would not be, how am I going to pay for it? It would be, how am I going to get better, right? And that's the system that we want. But it's also true that our system is so backwards that it actually saves money to give everyone, including the 30 million who are uninsured right now, to give everyone better health care than they have right now saves money. That's what you pointed out. That's why they were so embarrassed that you went into the tables and found that by their own numbers, this system saves money.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that's the way to really talk about it as well. We need to make a moral judgment first and foremost that everyone in the country, if they get sick, they deserve to be able to go to the doctor. They deserve to have health care. Everyone deserves to be covered. That's step one. From there, we have to talk about what's the most efficient way to do that? What's the most effective way to do that? And when you start answering that question, what you find is that Medicare for all, having a single national health insurer instead of hundreds of insurers and all these complicated arrangements, that is the most efficient way to do it. And it turns out that way is so much more efficient than our current system, where you have tons and tons and tons of different employers and insurers and blah, blah, blah. It's so much more efficient that you can cover everyone and still save money just because of the efficiencies involved in that system.
Which the corporate media cannot allow that to be the story, right? Like, to me, Matt, it was a thing of beauty watching this unfold. And they couldn't actually fight their own study. And let me just point out that, like, Chuck actually used and definitely was relying on the fact that he was a former public trustee of Medicare. He would use that as, like, you know, speaking from this position of authority, not noting that he was in an incredibly rare thing in Washington, D.C. He was denied an appointment, a further appointment as a public trustee, because he only used that position to politically attack policies for his corporate paymasters. The same corporate paymasters who then fought back against what you found and what was spreading out there as the narrative. And now we get to, I don't have a witty title for it, but it's something, they unleashed the hounds, who are called the fact checkers, it really was this thing that was, I think a lot of people noted previously, but this one I think really was visible. You can't let the corporate media have this mantle of fact checkers, like, because they don't care about the facts. They do what they're told. So the fact checkers take us through this next part, when the empire struck back with their fact checkers, their quote unquote fact checkers.
Yeah, so the communications staff at Mercatus started sending emails, and I've actually gotten some of these emails. I've gotten copies of them to the various fact checkers. Glenn Kessler at the Washington Post, factcheck.org, Jake Tapper at CNN, and they would go to them and say, hey, this $2 trillion figure that people are talking about, that Bernie Sanders in particular is now talking about, that's really deceptive. Our study really didn't find that. What our study really found was that it was going to cost more than our current system because, and they would then say, if you look in the appendix of our report, we have this other table where we make other assumptions, and with those other assumptions, the price actually goes up somewhat. But what's important to note here is their second estimate, the one where the price is higher, that is not based on Bernie Sanders' plan, and they say that specifically in the text. What they say is, basically, we're not sure if Bernie Sanders is going to be able to politically get his plan through as written. So let's assume that maybe the only way to get this through is by increasing the prices a little bit. And if you do that, you get this other estimate. But that's not Bernie Sanders' plan. It's not an estimate of Bernie Sanders' plan. That's why it's in the appendix of the report. They didn't promote that estimate to anyone in the country when they were releasing the report. Now they want to come back and go, that's the real one. That's the real one. And Bernie's lying by not bringing that up. And the problem with the fact checkers is they don't know what the report says. I mean, they can't read the report. It's a very technical report. It requires a level of expertise that, only some people have. And so they just kind of take what Mercatus tells them and write it up. They didn't contact me to say, is this right? Can you explain to me why Mercatus is telling me your stuff is wrong? They didn't contact the Bernie office. Warren Gunnels, Bernie Sanders policy director, has said publicly they didn't contact me when they were writing these fact checks. They just took one source, Mercatus, who was embarrassed about how their study was received, and started telling them lies. They just took what they said and printed it, basically, over and over and over again.
It. And this is, Matt, I will say you and I have a slight disagreement here, and I think it's maybe you're a nicer person than me, or I'm not going to guess as to why. I don't at all believe that it's because they don't know how to read the reports. They could read the reports. They have staff. They do what they're told because that's what they do. And the fact checkers have a history of this, and it was a coordinated attack to protect their corporate bottom lines. We can have that disagreement because, neither of us can look into their hearts. I've just seen them do this on Social Security before, time and time again. Yeah. We actually had a program, it wasn't like robust or anything, where we tried to convince people, look, don't lift up the corporate fact checkers even when you agree with them, because that's just them building up their political capital, and they'll burn it all at that moment when they need to, when their paymaster says, do this. And that's what I saw in this Mercatus study, was a coordinated attack on, because they will lose money. Like they're part of this whole cabal, the whole oligarchy. That this is their propaganda operation. And I have to say, it was so much fun watching you. Like, you just did the math, and you're like, hey, your own study actually wrong foots you. And I'm going to let you have the last kind of words here to close out, because we're not done. It's actually still an ongoing. Where are we right now in this? The fact checkers have fought back, but I do think that you're winning again. Like, I just saw Paul Krugman again weigh in and be like, no, the fact checkers are wrong here. They're lying. Right. And I think it was on purpose, right? I don't think it was a mistake. I think they did it on purpose. It was a willful lying to try to obfuscate the fact that our current system is unaffordable and the only path forward is an improved Medicare for all system. But where are we right now? And for this show especially, can people get involved in this fight? How can people get involved in this fight?
So right now, I've gone about correcting a lot of the fact checkers. So William Kessler at the Washington Post gave Bernie Sanders 3 out of 4 Pinocchios. I pointed out that his piece had 3 factual errors. He had to then go in and correct all 3 of his factual errors in his fact check. Jake Tapper did a video saying Bernie was being misleading and lying, and then Jake Tapper then had to go reshoot the video because he was, spreading the same falsehoods that were in all these other fact checks. So I've been kind of systematically going to the fact checkers, pointing out that claims that Mercatus are telling them are not true, and a lot of them have been correcting them. Other than that, there are a couple of journalists I know right now who are working on kind of bigger pieces about this debacle and about some of the claims that spread. And so I look forward to those coming out and seeing how those, affect the discourse. As far as getting involved, it's tough because it's all happening at this sort of quasi-elite level, and they just ignore people. The only reason I'm not ignored.
Yeah, but let me tell people how they can get involved then, Matt, and I'll let you finish. But they ignore people, but they can't ignore you. Your voice was not, they couldn't ignore you. So people, they can get involved in what you're doing. They can raise your voice up as a truth teller and they can go. Can you give the URL where people can find your work and raise up your voice?
If you go to peoplespolicyproject.org, we are a crowd-funded think tank. We don't take any money from foundations, corporations, anything. It's all small donors. And so, if you wanted to subscribe, you could help that. And like you said, yeah, I'm in a rare situation where what I say, people do pay attention to it. And so, you can help support me in my little foothold in the, national discourse.
Matt Bruenig, the founder of the People's Policy Project. The question is, who watches the Watchmen? And the answer is the people do. So check out the People's Policy Project. Raise up voices like Matt's who are telling the truth. We're going to win this fight. We're going to get to guaranteed health care for everyone in this country as a right, because it's the only way forward. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the Zero Hour.
Thanks for having me.